In 532 AD, a disagreement over a sports game escalated so violently that it burned down half of the greatest city on earth, nearly toppled the Roman Empire, and ended in the brutal slaughter of 30,000 people inside a locked stadium. This isn't myth. This is the true story of the Nika Riots, the deadliest sporting event in human history, and it all begins with the ancient equivalent of sports hooligans accidentally triggering an apocalypse. It is January 13th, 532, and we are in Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Byzantine Roman Empire. The city is the center of the world, a booming metropolis of wealth, trade, and staggering architecture. But the beating heart of this city isn't the palace or the church, it's the hippodrome. This is a colossal U-shaped chariot racing stadium that holds 100,000 screaming fans, and the fans in Constantinople are entirely out of their minds. They are divided into factions, the most powerful being the Blues and the Greens. These aren't just fan clubs, they are street gangs, organized crime syndicates, and powerful political lobbying groups all rolled into one. They have their own militias, their own territories, and their own bizarre fashion sense, including shaved foreheads and long unkempt hair in the back to mimic the barbarian Huns. The Blues and the Greens hate each other. They routinely murder each other in the streets. But today, Emperor Justinian is sitting in his imperial box overlooking the stadium, and the atmosphere is incredibly tense. Justinian is a controversial ruler. He was born a peasant, rose to absolute power, taxes the population ruthlessly, and is married to Empress Theodora, a brilliant, fiercely intelligent woman who used to be a scandalous stage actress. The old aristocratic money in the city despises them both. Just a few days prior, Justinian had ordered a crackdown on gang violence after a deadly street brawl, sentencing several ringleaders from both the Blues and the Greens to be hanged. But in a moment of sheer, unbelievable irony, the execution was botched. The gallows scaffold broke under their weight. Two of the condemned men, one blue, one green, fell to the ground alive, managed to slip away in the confusion, and took sanctuary inside a local church. The crowd in the hippodrome today is begging Justinian to pardon these two men. But Justinian is sitting high above them, stone-faced. He refuses to acknowledge them. He signals for the 20-second chariot race to begin, and that is his fatal mistake. The crowd's mood instantly sours from pleading to pure, unadulterated rage. But instead of fighting each other, the Blues and the Greens do the unthinkable. They unite. Across the massive stone bowl of the stadium, a chant begins to build, echoing off the marble walls, growing louder and louder. Nika, Nika! It means conquer or win. They aren't cheering for the chariots anymore. They are screaming at the emperor. The races are abandoned. Thousands of furious, heavily armed gang members flood out of the hippodrome and into the streets, united for the first time in history by their shared hatred of the government. They march straight to the city prison, butcher the guards, set the prisoners free, and burn the building to the ground. Justinian locks himself inside the sprawling imperial palace complex, thinking the riot will burn itself out by morning. He is wrong. The next day, the riot mutates into a full-scale revolution. Secretly backed by wealthy senators who want Justinian overthrown, the mob starts systematically torching the capital. The fires are catastrophic. The flames leap from building to building, creating a firestorm that engulfs the city's most magnificent structures, including the original Hagia Sophia, the premier church of the empire. For 5 agonizing days, Constantinople becomes a waking nightmare of ash, smoke, and screaming. The sky is black. People are being murdered in the streets. The imperial palace is under siege, completely surrounded by tens of thousands of rioters armed with swords, spears, and burning torches. Justinian attempts to appease them by firing his most unpopular tax collectors, but the mob is way past negotiations. They want a new emperor. They violently kick down the doors of a wealthy nobleman named Hypatius. Hypatius is the nephew of a former emperor, but he has zero interest in ruling. He is literally hiding under his bed when the mob finds him. His wife clings to his cloak, sobbing, begging the crowd not to take her husband, but they tear him away, drag him to the hippodrome, and because they don't have a royal crown, they place a gold necklace on his head and declare him the new emperor of Rome. Inside the palace, Justinian realizes it is over. The greatest empire in the world is crumbling because of a chariot racing a dispute. Sweating, terrified, and defeated, he orders his servants to load the imperial treasury onto ships docked at the private palace harbor. He convenes his top generals and advisors and tells them to pack their bags. They are fleeing the city. But then, in one of the most cinematic, jaw-dropping moments in recorded history, Empress Theodora stands up. The room falls dead silent. She is the daughter of a bear trainer, a woman who clawed her way out of the slums to the highest throne on earth, and she absolutely refuses to run. She looks at her husband and the hardened military generals, and she delivers a speech so cold and so powerful that it changes the course of Western civilization forever. She tells them that if they want to flee, the ships are ready, and they have plenty of money, but she reminds them that anyone who has been an emperor can never survive as a fugitive. She refuses to take off her royal purple robes. She looks Justinian dead in the eye and utters a line that has echoed through the centuries. As for me, I agree with the ancient saying, the royal purple makes a fine winding sheet. A winding sheet is a burial shroud. She is telling the most powerful men in the world that she would rather die in a bloodbath as an empress than live as a coward in exile. The sheer weight of her courage shames the men in the room. Justinian stops packing. The terror leaves his eyes, replaced by a cold, terrifying resolve. He summons his two best generals, Belisarius and Mundus. He doesn't ask them to negotiate anymore, he asks them to end it. Belisarius and Mundus gather a force of battle-hardened, heavily armored Gothic mercenaries, troops who are not from Constantinople, who don't care about chariot racing, and who have absolutely zero sympathy for the mob. The generals quietly march these killing machines through the smoking, ash-choked ruins of the city toward the hippodrome. Inside the stadium, over 30,000 rebels, blues and greens, are packed shoulder to shoulder, cheering, celebrating their new Emperor Hypatius, completely unaware of what is coming. They think they have won. They think the city is theirs. Belisarius and Mundus arrive at the massive wooden gates of the stadium. They lock the exits. Nobody is getting out. Then, on Belisarius' command, the heavily armored imperial troops draw their broadswords, kick open the main gates, and march into the packed arena. The celebration instantly turns to sheer, unadulterated terror. The mob is mostly unarmored civilians armed with clubs and stolen daggers. The imperial troops are the deadliest professional soldiers on the planet. The soldiers advance in a relentless mechanical shield wall, hacking, stabbing, and slaughtering their way through the tightly packed crowd. It isn't a battle. It is an industrial-scale execution. Panic erupts, but there is nowhere to run. People are trampled to death trying to climb the sheer marble walls of the stadium. The screams can be heard echoing all the way back to the palace where Justinian and Theodora wait in silence. The slaughter goes on for hours until the sands of the hippodrome are literally saturated, pooling with blood. When the swords finally stop swinging, the stadium is a graveyard. 30,000 people, nearly 10% of the entire population of the city, lay dead. Hypatius, the reluctant, accidental emperor, is dragged out from the pile of bodies, brought before Justinian, and promptly executed, his body thrown into the sea. The Nika Riots are over. The political power of the chariot factions is permanently broken, shattered in a single afternoon of unprecedented violence. Justinian uses the newly cleared, burnt-down real estate of the city to rebuild Constantinople into an architectural marvel, constructing the breathtaking new Hagia Sophia that still stands in Istanbul today. He and Theodora would go on to launch massive military campaigns, reconquering lost Roman territories in Italy and Africa, leaving a legacy as two of the most consequential rulers in history. But none of it, the conquests, the architecture, the legal codes we still use today, would have happened if a group of sports fans hadn't accidentally pushed a brilliant woman to the absolute edge. And the craziest part? History books often gloss over the Nika Riots as just a strange footnote about chariot racing, completely ignoring the fact that it perfectly illustrates the terrifying fragility of human society. It forces us to look at the massive, polarized crowds of our modern world, the screaming stadiums, the bitter political factions, the street protests, and ask a very uncomfortable question. If the greatest empire of the ancient world could be brought to the brink of total annihilation over a sporting event and a botched execution, how incredibly thin is the line that separates our own modern civilized world from the exact same kind of uncontrollable, world-ending fire?